Okay, so welcome to the next episode of the Path Less Chosen Pod, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. I'm Jamie.
I'm Sol.
So today's guest is Maddy Wright, who I was introduced to at a pub, and she introduced herself as a literary agent, and I was very confused as to what exactly that meant. But the more she told me about it, the more I thought we've definitely got to get this girl on the podcast. So I'm very excited to chat to her about it today. She's going to tell us a little bit more exactly as to what it is. I know she works a lot in film, in stage, in arts and entertainment. So it's going to be a very interesting career to chat about. I'm sure she's going to have lots of great messages about how she got into it. Anything you're particularly looking forward to here, Sol?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've learned a bit about the whole agency side through you and fascinated in that, but had absolutely no idea that there was any sort of agents involved in the arts, music, and film world. So, yeah, gonna be interesting to know about that, and also what was her actual passion for that made her kind of seek out that sort of profession. So, yeah, looking forward to it all, and let's get her on.
Okay, Maddie, thank you so much for joining us. I think probably an obvious place to start. The majority of people that might see your job title will be what the hell is a literary agent? So let's start with that. Do you want to explain exactly what the job title means and what you do?
Yes, yes. Hey, hi. So nice to be on the podcast. Thank you guys. So I am a literary agent's assistant, and what that means is I work for an agency that represents writers, directors, actors, producers, other talent in film, television, and the stage. And in the literary department, we represent the writers and director side of it. And we are responsible for a group of clients, and we look after their work and their careers. We negotiate deals for them, get them jobs, and it's essentially helping look after the jobs that they're doing and their rights and freedoms and creative freedoms within that. So I love the job because you wear so many different hats. You're speaking directly with clients and checking in with what they want and how they're feeling about things. You're communicating with producers. You're reading lots of samples, lots of scripts. And it's this like really exciting and probably quite an area of the industry that not many people know about because it sort of sits a little bit before and a little bit behind a lot of the main attractions.
Amazing. That's so cool. And that's such a good
Yeah.
summation of what you do overall. But I'd love to know what does an actual day look like when you wake up in the morning? What do you do?
So in the agent world, you every agent has their client list and the people that they are responsible for, and those are relationships that they've fostered over a long time. So I work for quite a senior agent who's been in the job for a long time and has looks after clients that he's known since their 20s, but is also signing new people. So there's a huge range of writers and directors from like his youngest is 23 and goes like all the way up. And so as an assistant, I'm checking in on their individual projects. The people that are working, it's about invoicing, making sure they know their schedule, and people that are about to start working, it's negotiating their contracts. And then people that are not currently in jobs or about to come to the end of the job, it's finding the next gig for them. The most fun part is when I can create time in the afternoon to look for what jobs are about. We might get a producer call and say, can you please let us know if this person's available between like October to next February? And then I'll try and find out a bit more about their project. If they're being a bit secretive, then I'll like try and pull together as much info as I can and maybe suggest some other people and pitch some people. And then that's how the wheel starts spinning for getting directors and writers jobs.
Amazing. You're in the world of film and movie stars and all that sort of thing. Like,
Yeah.
so there must be some seriously exciting, cool people or work you've done. I'm not saying you should name drop people if you can't, but
Yeah, completely. Like it's so exciting. So in the company, it's a really big agency and people are represented in as actors and also as writers and directors. And so there's always chat about like what's going on, who's got projects, if a really big actor might be signed on to a project that hasn't got a director yet. And then as an agency, we like that will come up in a meeting and it's like, oh my gosh, this absolute superstar needs to be directed in a project that they're really passionate about. So we're then thinking, okay, which of our clients would suit that and who would be good at that? And that's such an exciting thing. And the scripts that come in. I mean, we'll talk more maybe about kind of how I ended up here, but the scripts are so exciting and important to me, and I love like getting right down to the start of the storytelling. So reading a good script is like the most exciting and inspiring part of it. Sometimes, I mean, you get exciting people coming into the office all the time, which I still get really excited about, but it is definitely like an amazing script coming in from a big production company about a story that you know is going to create buzz, and just having to be discreet about it and then waiting for the deadline article to come out a few months later and be like, it's happening, it's happening.
Wow. So give us a bit more of a sense of that process then from start to. Does it work that you literally will get sent a script and then you, based on the clients you work with, you kind of have to have some personal understanding of what they're looking for and what you want? And then how does it go from that point there where you are then searching for these jobs through the scripts and then landing them with a certain role or position?
Yeah, I think probably something that would have been useful for me to have said earlier was how much this job is about matchmaking and connecting the dots and like putting the right people in the right rooms together so that they can create and connect together. And so a film or a series could come about by like a production company or producer having an idea or some, we call it IP, where a production company might have acquired or bought some. That could be a book, a news article, a podcast, and then they're looking to develop it. And if we can set up the right meetings, get clients to meet those people or talk with them ourselves, and then pass that information on to clients, and that's something that people can connect with and develop together. So sometimes the inception is like literally right from the beginning, but then sometimes it will be a writer might write a script on spec without being paid and then sell it, or might be commissioned to write something based on an idea that they've spoken about with a company, and then adaptations happen, or it's like second, third, fourth series, and there are open director assignments where you have to think, okay, this show that's going into its second series, like we know the tone, we know that this director is really passionate about like hard hitting dramas, or really wants to get involved in like a female led thriller, or has an amazing comedic tone, and wants to explore that with a streamer, blah blah blah. And so kind of pulling together the right people, pitching them, and getting those conversations going. It really
Yeah.
happens in so many different ways, but those kind of three main ways that people end up getting jobs on various shows and films. Films take so much longer, like years and years and years and years, but shows can happen quite quickly.
Okay, cool. And obviously you say that like the matchmaking part, right? How of someone of with the greatest respect, your age and our age, you got into a position where you're matchmaking people.
So from my role at the moment, I, as an assistant, like run everything to an extent. I will check in with my boss, and if I have particular ideas, he's a really supportive and encouraging person. He'll be like, that's a great idea. That one, maybe actually I would introduce these people instead. But a lot of it is working together. And, when you, as an agent's assistant, work so directly from one person, like a lot of the time you're following their lead, and they'll do introductions and then you're kind of tying the bows. But it's something, I think it's a huge part of the industry throughout. And when starting off, it's like you meet people, and if you connect, then that's wonderful. And if you think that they'll get on with other people or have interesting ways of collaborating, then you can make those introductions, and that all kind of comes around and around. It's a really positive feedback loop. And so that nature, the sort of, yeah, that part of the industry, I think I've seen come up again and again. And I think that it's a really fundamental part, like how it all keeps going.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on that you said there before, just asking a little bit more on the whole networking and how that works in the film and arts industry, is you mentioned you go to your boss with ideas. Is that something that is part of your role? Like, is your role to have a bit of a creative brain and think about what might work well? And is that a way of progressing in the industry as well? So talk us through a little bit about like what are these ideas and how come you're in a position where you're thinking of them to take to your boss?
Totally. I mean, he in particular is really encouraging of having open conversations and like listening to ideas. And so it might be something like a show that's looking for a director. If there's someone that I think he hasn't thought of and I can say, oh, what about this person? I think they'd be great for it. I've done the research on these particular credits that they have that would correlate, and they'll be like, if that's a great idea, then that's kind of mine to act on, which is always a really fun thing. And then same comes with scripts. The assistants do a lot of the script reading and breakdowns, and so we can give quite honest opinions on that. And it, when you join that role, you do a script breakdown in order to get the role. That's like sort of part of the interview process, and so you hope that you've once you've been hired, it's because they trust that you can give a formed opinion about your taste.
But how do you learn how to give that informed opinion? Like, is that something you've learned on the job, or like is that a skill that you have to be taught?
Both. I think it comes from, watching lots of things and reading lots of things. And I studied English, so that really helps because that sort of informs how I can structure and write. But then I'm like learning every day how to have a more specific and useful opinion about things. There are all sorts of schemes and opportunities that you do. One of the sort of freelance bits of work I did was I was a runner on a screenwriting competition, not competition, a screenwriting course where this was like 2 years ago, and I essentially it was a weekend long course, and I was the runner there. So it basically was just like sorting out things on the floor and like doing getting everyone lunch and, just being at their beck and call. But it meant that I got to sit in on all of their workshops. All these amazing producers and other agents were coming in to do talks that I got to sit in on. And so things like that, like you just make notes and listen and learn. Yeah.
And is that like you've made it sound like it's quite simple there, but I imagine in an industry like that where there's probably a lot of competition against each other on these creative ideas, have you ever found it like a challenge where you haven't had the confidence to present an idea because you haven't felt like you're qualified to speak in that kind of area? Or is it something that's come naturally to you in that circle, or something that you've developed the confidence to be able to do?
Totally. I think it is important to like know when to speak up and when to just kind of like sit back and learn. Not even sit back because it's always an active thing. So I think when you're not necessarily like pitching and putting yourself forward, you're still learning and absorbing. So yeah, it's definitely been a process of like learning when to jump up with your idea, but also knowing that the film and television industry is so like ever evolving, a slightly wild place in that everyone's journey through it is so different and unique, and it's always changing. If you have ideas and you're a collaborative and hardworking person who also has respect for boundaries and the fact that people have like done this stuff for a long time, then there's room for it. And I think things are hard to execute. So if you have ideas, I feel like I'm speaking in really vague general terms, but only because I think it applies to things whether you're like writing a short film or just presenting an idea that you think this client might like this book, that they can all be comparable. And I think it's really important though to take those risks. It is quite like a hustling industry. If you don't create the opportunities and if you don't, then they won't necessarily present themselves to you.
And literally on that, how have you gone and created opportunities? What are the ways that you've or have seen people create opportunities that you're like, that's amazing, why don't I try this?
Yeah, I have met through over the like sort of last 3 years, I guess, met some really wonderful, very cool people that have shown me how important it is to pull up your own chair at the table. I met someone at a networking event like 2 years ago who had essentially done a pitch deck for a job that she felt that didn't exist at her company. So she was in a role at her company and was like, I can see that you need someone in this particular role, and I think I would be really good at that. And so she sort of like asked if she could speak to them and brought this whole pitch deck, and then they created their role for her. And hearing her do that, I was like, oh, that is so cool. And it just was such a flag to like keep your eyes open. And if you feel really passionate about something, like you need to go get it. But in terms of the opportunities that I have created, a lot of it, because there are so many different ways to get into the industry, and I knew absolutely nothing about it before I got going. It has been so much of doing a job, learning, asking people, and then finding the next step. Everything I've done, every sort of internship or work experience or runner work, I've tried to keep in touch with people and work out like where to go next. And people have been really helpful and kind and sharing opportunities that come along, but also it's like reaching out to really, really specifically and doing the research and working out who does what and finding the people that inspire you. And the jobs that I've had that have been the most exciting to me have been ones where I've been like, oh, I love what this person does. I'm going to reach out to them directly and let them know that I'm really inspired by that and that I'm available and would be really willing to just get stuck in and learn in the right places and with the right people, and being ready to do some like boring work as well, because you know that actually it is exciting, and if you're willing to just get stuck in, then the really great exciting things come.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. I think there's a couple of really important messages in there, and I think like listening to you, I'm relating it a lot back to like my own personal situation in like the sports side of
Mm.
things. I could massively relate to the whole doing like boring work or working for free just at the start, because that's the kind of
Yeah.
sacrifice you have to make to kind of get into that. I found it interesting that you said like you have to pull up your own chair at the table. You know, you've got to take that action, but actually that people have been quite like recipients of that, like they've been
Yeah,
willing to help you, quite kind. And I think if that's not really a
totally.
general, you can't really say that's a general statement about sport. Usually people are actually quite defensive, they don't want to share anything with you. So I
Yeah.
don't know, is that a general thing in the arts and entertainment world, that people help each other, or is there a sense of competition that perhaps is quite difficult?
I mean, there definitely is that competitive sense to it because there are quite few jobs, and definitely quite few jobs advertised. So many things are taken without ever going onto like LinkedIn or the websites and stuff. But people have been so giving, and it really does come back around. The first job that I did some work experience straight after uni with someone that I'd met through like doing a podcast at DUCFS at Durham. And then and I didn't get anything for so long. I was like sat on my bed every day applying for runner roles. And then actually someone sort of replied, I'd applied to be a runner on a short film. And this person replied, and it was sort of then became like, oh well, they actually need someone, can they afford someone? I ended up doing the work for free anyway because it was like over a weekend and I really wanted the experience, but it was all very last minute. I thought it had gone away, I'd like checked in, and then I was literally going to a dinner and like on my way to the tube sort of 7 p.m. when suddenly they're like, okay, yeah, we do need you, can you please be in Clerkenwell for like 5 a.m. tomorrow morning? I was like, my God. But yes, of course, absolutely. We'll be there. And then it was the best time ever. I learned so much. I was completely thrown in the deep end. I remember getting there, having never been on a set ever. I had no idea what roles there were. I was like Googling it all on the way. And someone threw a box and was like, can you mic everyone up? Like, sure, eek, find out how to do this. So it was an absolute whirlwind. But then that producer was, because I'd worked so hard on it, was then so willing to like go for a coffee, answer all my questions, had such useful advice. I then ended up sort of shadowing him, doing some like producer work on his next short. And now we like stay in touch, and sometimes he asks me questions like, oh, could you let me know who represents this person or any advice on this and blah blah, and I still go to him for help and questions always. So that's what I mean in the sense of people being willing to help, because it like it becomes quite a mutual relationship and also gets passed down as well. Like now, if someone reached out to ask if like to go take me for coffee to ask questions, like even though I know that I'm very much at the start of my career and have a lot to learn, there are a few bits that I can share, and I'm like absolutely willing to pass that on.
And so interesting. You touched on your journey there, but we've not actually spoken to how you really got to where you are now.
Where to begin? I knew that I wanted to work in like quote unquote storytelling, which I know sounds really cheesy, but I mean it. Like that is, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what that was going to look like.
Can I just ask very quickly, how did you
Yeah.
know that you wanted to do that? What made you realize you wanted to be in storytelling?
It's so cheesy. I think like
We like cheese.
genuinely, it was like, oh, like honestly, doing like To Kill a Mockingbird in year 10 for GCSEs. I was like, this is changing lives. This is so important. And I loved my English teacher so much, and she wrote in her leaving card, you have to go and study English at uni, and so I did. Like genuinely, that was her fault. And then time and time again, I've always been drawn to like how stories can completely reframe and educate and help us see the world in different lights. And like I used to absolutely have like meltdowns about what I was going to do in my future, and I still, don't know what my next 10, 20 years is going to look like. But I would always try and like, I know it would always kind of come down to that quote concept, come down to the concept of storytelling. But I didn't know whether that was going to be like for a charity or for writing or in marketing. And the film industry kind of didn't seem like a real option to me. I was like, how is that? That's not a real thing. People don't actually work in film. But it was when I was part of DCFS on the events team, and it was during COVID, so we couldn't do any live events. We did a podcast, and we spoke to an editor who had worked across the film industry, sort of all different jobs and parts, and had done some producing and directing and blah blah blah. And he was like, "My God, you don't need to go to film school. Just come and get stuck in." Obviously, film school offers so much, and I've met some incredibly skilled and amazing people that have done that. But it was too late for me. And he was like, come get stuck in. So I took that to heart and emailed him after asking if I could come and do some like shadow work experience. And then after uni went and did a week just being a runner in their office, which was really, really fun. I learned so much. But then I still had like no idea of how the industry worked, and had no answer when people said like, oh, so what actually within film do you want to do? I really struggled to answer because I didn't really understand the options and like what different things were out there. So I just tried to get involved in as much as possible, and working on short films and seeing the different roles that were had, and then speaking to anyone that would speak to me, whether in like documentary or TV, factual, just to try and like gradually piece it all together in my head.
Yeah, I think that's a really like refreshing like way of your journey because we're all about the path that's chosen here, of course. But like even going to film school would have been a path less chosen, but the way you've ended up where you
Yeah.
are is even more unique than that. I think I probably had it in my head that stereotypically, like you say, it's like a dream career that's probably a difficult industry to break into. And like anyone that does break into it, it's either because they've grown up in LA, they've lived their life on a set, or at the very least, they've
Mhm.
gone to film school or have some kind of background in that. So it's fascinating to hear that like that's the route you've gone down in. I think it'd be interesting for people to know like how did you actually get the job you're in now? Did you apply? Was it through someone you knew? Was it based on a role you'd already had and work you'd already done?
It was a proper interview process,
Right.
and I'd had a couple interviews before that. Sort of in the few months leading up to it, I'd had quite a few jobs that I was really excited about and got through to the final two kind of situation. And that every
Right.
time you're like, oh my God, like knife to the heart, this is so gutting. But this one, I it was someone that I'd spoken, it was actually someone I'd been put in touch with to speak to. Like I had mentioned that I was really interested in agenting and I didn't know anything about it. And then someone was like, oh, I've met recently this person who's an agent. I'm sure they'd be willing to chat. So it was that kind of thing happening again. Texted them, introduced myself, asked if I could have 15 minutes with them. And then like a month later, they texted saying, "Oh, I heard this agent's looking for a assistant." So I wouldn't have heard about the job if they hadn't, and it was like on the website and open. I just hadn't seen it. So that's how I applied, and then I had like 3 interviews and did a script breakdown, which is when you read a script and then do like a summary and a bit of analysis and a bit of opinion. But then I didn't get the job the first time around and was really sad about that, but kept going and thankfully was already in work anyway, and so carried on with the job that I was doing, which was a environmental documentary. So that was really fun and exciting. And then just as that was coming to an end, got a text from the person that had interviewed me to say, like, I'm actually looking again. Would you want to come back in for a follow-up interview? So I went back in and then got the job that time, which I think was just a really nice example of like timing, doing its thing, trusting the process. And yeah, things all worked out really nicely there.
We love to be very open and honest about jobs and the path less
Mm.
chosen, all that sort of things. Firstly, we would love to hear like what are the genuine best bits about your job that you absolutely love, and then also what are the parts that you're like, okay, you know, I have to grin and bear this.
No, I love that you guys have asked this because it is so. I would say to anyone interested in film or any creatives, actually, like you have to be prepared to do some boring work. And so I do loads of invoicing, because otherwise people wouldn't get paid. And so, as I'm doing it, I'm like, this is mind-numbing, but also very important. And I have to do a lot of scheduling, a lot of managing people's diaries. Just got to be done. It's when it goes wrong, it's like absolutely mind blowing. So you're like, this is so simple. Come on. But yeah, that's an important thing. When you're a runner, like, and people kind of joke about like, oh, you're making everyone's tea. Like, you are genuinely making everyone's tea and coffee. If you honestly think about it, like, if you're a really senior person and someone makes you a gross, like too milky, slightly cold cup of tea, and then someone makes you like their perfect cup of tea, who are you going to think of first when you've got another job opening coming up in a few weeks' time? So the small things matter and people remember it. And now that we have runners at work, and the ones that just like get stuck in and do the boring things like amazingly. Everyone's like, oh my God, so, get them an assistant role. We will vouch for them and we like really fly their flags. So there are, without being negative, just being real, there are some boring sides to it. But then there are loads of pretty exciting sides. And it's so people facing that like if you enjoy chatting and hearing what people are up to, and it's dreamy. I mean, so it's because of the nature of the job of like staying kind of finger on the pulse. People are always like, you've got to be ahead of the game and know what's about. Get to see a lot of theatre and movies and screenings. So I went to I sometimes get to go to preview screenings, like where they put on a show before it's actually come out. And I went to one a few weeks ago that is coming out on Disney in the autumn, and there was a Disney security guard in the screening room with us. It was wild. We all sat there like at 9 o'clock we all sat there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and this big security guard was like in the corner watching everyone. And if anyone got their phone out, they like stormed over and snatched it away. And went to another preview screening for a client that we have who did actually it's called We're Lady Parts. I think I can say that. It's called We're Lady Parts. It's out on TV. It's amazing. It's one of the best things I've seen on TV for a long time. Channel 4 hosted a preview screening of that with a Q&A with all the cast and like things like that. It was so exciting, and getting to see and chat to the clients and chat to the actors, and they're all like so passionate about it. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's very cool, very cool. What does it look like for you in the next like 5-10 years? Is there career progression within the agency, or do you look to do something else, more red carpets, more glamorous, or does it get more stressful and harder?
I think the red carpets and the glamour come with the stress, so that's like
Right.
they come hand in hand. The future, the agency has really good sort of career progression and room for growth, because the progression from where I am now is like you learn more about contracts and the deals that are done, and therefore there is basically a lot of room to grow and keep learning about that, and then have more autonomy with the clients and have quite individual relationships with clients and be like the responsible person for getting them their jobs. And then eventually people start signing their own clients kind of like a couple years in, depending on how much graft they've got and how much they want to do that. I love the industry because there is room to maneuver and work out your path from within, and there are so many different roles and so many skill sets that are needed, and you need to have a sense of direction and a sense of purpose, but you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. I love that throughout that, not once have you mentioned any idea that you might ever leave the industry, and it's like full focus on, yeah,
No,
I want to be here.
completely.
Goes to show
Honestly,
how much you love it.
yeah, it's such a career for life. And now one of the most sort of gratifying things I think is working with people and meeting other young like creatives or people in the industry and thinking we will probably know each other and work together for the rest of our lives. And I see that in the older generation of agents, like they'll mention like the James Bond producers and like tell a story about a dinner that they had in their 20s together. These, huge people that in my eyes and other people's eyes are so it's like absolute superstars. The idea of them all like knowing each other as teens and early 20s just blows my mind, but that is kind of how it all begins.
That was so interesting, and let's cap all that interesting stuff off with the final question that we like to ask all our guests. So I'd like to ask you if you could go back to a time potentially when you realised that storytelling was exactly what you wanted to do. One thing you do the same, one thing you do differently, and one thing you tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Okay. One thing I would have done different, like right at the beginning and through my teens and during university, would have been to watch and read even more, because I love it and that is why I want to work where I do. And now I dedicate a lot of time to reading and watching things, but I think that there was so much more time that could have been dedicated to that I almost sort of like felt guilty to do it. I was like, no, I need to be working, I need to be revising, or I need to be doing whatever else. And actually, I should have just been, well, there. I'm so glad that I did all the like varied things that I did and worked hard, but also there are just like so many gaps in my knowledge of shows and films, and I wish I'd like just got stuck in earlier. One thing I do the same is I'm really glad that I kept in touch with the people that I kept in touch with, and sort of offered myself up. So when I was working for a company called Dartmouth Films, and a similar thing, I didn't get the job, but after the interview, when they let me know that I wasn't getting the job, I said, like, asked for specific feedback and said that I was going to be available for the coming months if they ever needed holiday cover. And then they did need holiday cover, and then I ended up staying and working with them sort of on and off for like the best part of 2 years. That sort of keeping in touch with people, I'm really glad I did, and hope that I continue to do. Okay. I would genuinely just tell myself, like, you will get a job, you will get paid for this work. Just keep going, and the right thing will find you, and you'll find it. Because there was a long period of rejections, and I honestly wish I'd like counted how many rejections I got in order to be able to just like tell you guys that stat, because it's gutting. But it kind of has to happen in order for you to find the right thing, because only retrospectively, like, that kind of things happen for a reason is so unhelpful in the moment, but it is true, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant message to finish on. I think what you've done so well throughout is you've somehow managed to deliver your story in such like a humble way, but there is no escaping
Thank
from
you.
the fact that you've worked your socks off to like get where you are now. And I think all of the messages around like making sure you're just getting involved, getting stuck in, that's just massive credit to you for putting in that shift, and you've got to where you are now as a result. So fair play to you, and thank you so much for talking to us. It was just as interesting as I thought it was going to be after our conversation in the pub. So really appreciate it.
So glad. Thank you guys very much for having me and creating these conversations because I think it's really, really cool what you're doing.
Okay, that was great. I really enjoyed that, and I definitely didn't know what a literary agent was an hour and a half ago. So that's a good little learning that we've got now. But let's crack on with the takeaways. So I'll hand over to you for the first takeaway, if that's all right, Jamie.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think the first one I'll go for is probably what's going to be the obvious title of this podcast, about pulling up your own chair at the table. She has done throughout what she told us was every single time she had the opportunity to take action, she did. And that's how she made like opportunities for herself and got her seat at the table. She was talking about how small things matter, and that's the kind of stuff that has led her to these opportunities. Things as little as making a good cup of coffee for someone or cup of tea so that she's front of mind for them whenever they're thinking of someone that can help them. And I think that was amazing in the amount of action that she's taken to pull up that seat.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, like, how funny that everyone complains that you're making the teas. Like, it's the classic example of doing the kind of bitch work, and actually, she sees the value in how good her cup of tea is for a director. Yeah, and it's like it's true, right? It's such an interesting way to think about it. And my takeaway from the second takeaway I'd say, which is following on from that, is not only have you got to like pull up the seat at the table, but the importance of having that network, that you maintain the connections with those people that you have at the table. And the example she showed there was that she had maintained this connection with this agent and asked for a 15-minute chat at one point. And after a few months, this agent recommended this job for another agent as their assistant, that then she is the working job she's working at now. And that to me is the perfect example of like why staying in contact with these people who are doing really well and around the right sort of people, nurturing that and continuing to nurture that network is so key, because you have no idea what's going to come from it.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's a very good way of summarizing the second key takeaway. I think for the final one thing I like that she said is learning about when to have an opinion about things, and then contrasting that with learning when to just sit there and proactively listen to the people around you that know what they're talking about, and when you can probably extract the most value out of just being in the room with them. And I think it's a message we get from lots of people where they say like, you've got to surround yourself with the right kind of people in a certain industry. But what she said shed like a real interesting light on is when, if you are in that room, there's times where you should speak and share your opinion to prove that you know what you're talking about and like assert yourself in such a situation. But there's also times where you just need to sit there quietly and listen and learn as much as you can. And I love that like balance and how she's figured that out for herself.
Yeah, spot on. Nothing more to add from me there. So to sum up those three takeaways, I would say first one is pulling your own chair up at the table. Second one is nurturing your network that you've already grown and not knowing what will come from it. The third the third one is knowing when to actively listen and knowing when to contribute and making sure you find the balance between both of them. So as I've summed that up, thinking unbelievable episode. Really, really enjoyed that. Thanks for organising that, and very appreciative of her coming on. So looking forward to the next episode. Anything to add, Jamie?
No, definitely. I think it's probably one that's worth keeping an eye on. I'll be very interested to see what Maddie's doing in a few years' time. I imagine she'll be with some pretty cool people and some nice red carpets around the world. So definitely a fascinating industry and a fascinating career for her individually.
For sure. Give us a rating, like, subscribe, share, all the rest. Very appreciative of the support, and we'll catch you next week.
Nice. See you next time.